Hey guys, welcome back. You're still tuned into Midcap Radar here on CNBC-TV18, and we're now going to talk about all of the logistics players and how that industry is really poised right now after the budget. There are a lot of announcements that have come through on the infra side as well. So let's get a sense on where things really stand. We're joined by Abhishek Chakraborty, Executive Director at DTDC Express. And we also have K Srikumar, who's the Senior Vice President and Co-Group Head of Corporate Ratings at ICRA. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining us. In fact, Abhishek is here at the studios. So Abhishek, thanks a lot for coming down to the studios for this conversation. Let me just begin by asking you, overall on the budget, of course, there was no big push this time, but that is sort of been a focus area, right, where you are trying to drive the logistics space. So what is your reading on where things currently stand in terms of the boost that the logistics industry has gotten and the kind of growth that you expect both for the industry and then for DTDC as well?
Thank you for having me here. I think your question is absolutely bang on, that while there weren't any big announcements, the fact is that the signs of what has been happening over the last couple of years is clearly being seen.
Yeah.
The overall growth of the economy, the overall growth of the industry has been very robust. Our industry has been growing roughly about 2 times the size of the GDP growth rate. I think the key focus here is how the PM Gati Shakti program is really playing itself out. Announcements in terms of the railway corridors that are being opened up, especially between the ports and the high density markets, is showing that there will be much more focus on that. That means that will be an opportunity to reduce cost, give better transit times, and that's always good news for our industry. Yeah. The fact that there's going to be much more focus on growth of airports is very, very important. We are a premium segment player, and almost all premium volumes in the express industry move on air. And we are able to offer money back guarantees on those air connections. So if more airports open up, there'll be faster transit times and means good news for consumers all around.
What's been the typical growth rate for your industry, maybe in the last 3 years, and how do you forecast it, or what kind of volume growth are you forecasting in the next couple of years, at least for your industry?
Post-COVID, I think the growth has been very robust. On an average, if you look at the last 4 years, an average growth rate about 15 to 16% in our industry has been very, very common. It's been driven by 2 things. One, e-commerce in itself is a huge booster of growth for our industry, but even the B2B side of it, as more and more manufacturing and focus on domestic consumption as well as export-driven growth is coming in, we see that even the B2B sector is really catching up. So both of these factors mean that the growth is very steady, it's rapid, and our industry happens to be one of the fastest growing industries overall.
Okay, we'll come down to what you can really expect on the growth for your own company in just a bit, but let me also bring Mr. Srikumar into this conversation. Mr. Srikumar, thanks a lot for joining us. Help us understand what you really expect overall for the logistics industry, both in terms of, the headwinds and tailwinds as you see them for the next couple of years.
Sure. At the outset, when we basically speak about this interim budget, we observe to be a kind of a balanced one, and more specifically for the logistics, warehousing, and the supply chain, it is neutral to positive. One, we can't look at a budget in isolation. We will have to look at budget over a period of time. In the recent budgets, what we have seen is that the proposals around this sector has been more structural and more long-term in focus. Apart from the general proposal supporting the factors that drive the demand, the fundamental demand, there were critical ones like this, PM Gati Shakti, which was obviously a transformative one aiming at a sustainable development. Then we had, to complement the same, we had this national logistics policy, and obviously the bigger challenges for this industry, if you have to speak about, is the high logistics cost and the other related inefficiencies. So as we all know that our logistics cost as percentage of GDP is still high compared to the other developed markets. On the specific budget, more specifically the trend that we see is largely similar. Continued focus on infra development on one side, and measures to reach the long-term goals. So our expectation from the industry as such is that, to kind of benefit and leverage upon the kind of proposals that has been supported, and more specifically achieve, larger goals, that is, reducing the logistics cost and make much more competitive as far as the global trade is concerned. Speaking about the specific, factors, this is again a continuation of the past proposals around the PM Gati Shakti. The creation of 3 major economic railway corridor programs, and it's obviously a welcome move. We will have to look at in connection with the establishment of the port connectivity corridors as well as the high traffic density corridors as well. So, which obviously means that the thrust on multimodal connectivity continues. Obviously, it will all lead to a well-integrated logistics ecosystem and supply chain efficiencies. few more takeaways from the budget, if you have to speak about, is the establishment of this India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. Obviously, this follows the MOU signed in the recently concluded G20 summit. This shall support the global trade and attract foreign investments. So, in a nutshell, if you have to speak about, the proposals are positive for the sector, and this better connectivity will facilitate faster movement of goods. So, speaking directly on the what it translates to the logistics sector, it's about having a much better efficiency, contribute to cost reduction, job creation, and economic growth.
Abhishek, I'm sure you largely concur with what he had to say, but a couple of quick questions for you as well. Number one, if you could give us a breakup of the segments that you're present in, and which is the segment that you're most bullish on in terms of volume growth as well as realization growth. The reason I'm asking you this is, after a while, ahead of what the market was anticipating, a player like Delivery, that has operations quite similar to you all, has managed to turn profitable on the bottom line. So how do you look at operations for yourself?
We are present in effectively three major segments. One is express parcels, integrated e-commerce, and international. And we see that growth is coming in all the three segments. Express parcels effectively caters to the small and medium packages, which is what both consumers and most B2B businesses require services for. E-commerce, of course, is a very huge segment, which is being driven both by the natural growth that is being seen in the industry. You're seeing large marketplaces grow, but also you're seeing this huge explosion of D2C and social commerce growth. And last but not the least, the international growth that is being seen in India, I think, is phenomenal. And what, for us, the focus remains on all three segments. We see in all three segments there's an opportunity to unlock efficiencies, to provide better quality of services, to try to continue to maintain prices but give a better value for money and return to our consumers. And that is how growth is being driven. And like you mentioned, that all players are able to see that with more and more development of infrastructure and our own investments, which we are making on technology and efficiency, it means that the output is going to be stronger, consumers are going to be happier with the quality of service, and that is what is going to be the driver for growth.
Okay, so what has growth looked like in Q3? If you could give us some sense on the numbers there. And you had earlier said that you expect around 30%. Has that come through?
See, we are seeing about a good robust growth of 15 to 20% that was seen in Q3. Okay. I think that is taking into fact that there were many aspects that were balanced both across the express segment as well as the international and e-commerce segment. There was some news that the e-commerce growth in the Q3, the big Diwali quarter, was slightly muted. But that could also be a sign of the fact that consumers are now also equally looking at physical retail. But as a player that cuts across both online and offline businesses as well, we see that that's a balanced approach that works best. We see this quarter is going to be a strong quarter, but I think the setup that we're making for the coming year. What is strong? I think a strong quarter means that we continue to maintain the similar kind of growth. 15 to 20%. Which would still be stronger than the whole industry as overall. But I think there is also a focus, as we said, on maintaining good bottom lines, bringing efficiencies, which is what the talk around bringing logistics costs down is all about, bringing efficiency. That is a main focus for us.
Absolutely. But, folks, that's all we have time, at least for this particular discussion. And, that's all we have time on for today's edition of Midcap Radar. Your stocks when we return.